without further ado, let's give a warm welcome, please, to Roberta.
Wow, there are a lot of people here. I had no idea. When you sit in the front, you miss a lot.
Diane.
Thank you for having me here. I'm so glad to be here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Diane.
Great. What happens if I use this, you won't be able to hear me at all because I'll do this. That's what I do because I start gesturing. So I'll just try to make sure this works. Thank you. Ooh, should we make it shorter? I don't know how to make this work. Oh, perfect. Perfect. This, as you can see, it's work in progress.
The lights, yeah, okay.
Thank you so much for having me here. I am thrilled to be here. I've had so much fun already, and I know this is going to just be a barrel of fun. I'm going to try to talk for only 45 minutes or so, and because I hope there'll be a lot of dialogue. You'll ask a lot of questions, and I'll give you answers. I've learned in a year of doing this that you can't stump me. If I don't know, I'll tell you this is what I think. But please be thinking up your questions, or else I'll have to make some up. And so I hope there'll be a lot of questions afterwards. And thank you. I just want to give a special thanks to Diane Willis, who does an unbelievable job, and to all the people who are involved in this group. This is a wonderful. I have been going all over the country speaking to a number of IANS groups, and what I've found consistently is that the people who have had near-death experiences and those around them are extraordinary. Just a special group, and you're basically leavening the loaf now, as Jesus said, trying to help. I'll try to shine brighter.
Without turning them all on. No, I can't because then we don't have a videotape. So,
That's good. You're bright. You're bright.
sorry.
She has an arm around her. She'll be fine.
Oh, thank you, bless you. And actually, I'm a lawyer, unlike you. However, I'm still practicing. I still don't have it right. To tell you the oldest joke in the world. My name is Roberta Grimes. When I was 8 years old, I had an extraordinary experience, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And I spent the next 50 years trying to understand what had happened to me when I was 8. The only way I could to do that was to study the afterlife. So that has been my obsessive hobby since I was a child. There wasn't much information then in the 50s and 60s, or even 70s, but then came wonderful Raymond Moody's Life After Life, and suddenly there was a flood of information. A lot of the best evidence, in my opinion, of the afterlife is older than 1950. And I concentrated my research in this period from the very end of the 19th century to through the first half of the 20th century, and I did that for a reason. I was very skeptical that anything I was reading was right, but most of the people I thought who were doing it back then, since they were doing it as serious researchers, they were less likely to be faking or making stuff up. I'll tell you a little more about what I read in a minute. But eventually I did learn what had happened to me, and I learned a whole lot more. I can tell you today what death is, how it works, and what happens right after death. I'm a one-trick pony. My focus is death and right after death. And although there's a whole lot of other information you gather from doing this research, that's the core for me. So even though I don't take my word for it, I'm giving you the Cliff Notes. My hope is to inspire you to go out and do your own research. The first appendix to The Fun of Dying is 60-odd books, which are categorized and summarized, annotated for you. Start reading, because the more you read, the more convinced you'll become in the core of your being that what I'm telling you is true, and it's much better. The title, The Fun of Dying, understates the reality. The best fun you ever have in your life comes at the end of what we think of as the end of it, but really the start of your greater life. So in April of 1955, I woke up in the middle of the night and I knew there was no God. Little, happy, religious child, I knew there was no God. It was like the bottom fell out of my world. I was horrified. It was a horrendous, horrendous feeling. I remember it like it was yesterday. And in the midst of it, there came a brilliant flash of light in the room. It was like burning magnesium, so bright that I remember now what that room looked like to this day. But you could look at this light without having to affect your eyes. Spiritual light is like that. It doesn't blind you. And in the midst of that light, this extraordinary experience, came a voice. a young male voice said, "You wouldn't know what it is to have me unless you knew what it is to be without me. I will never leave you again." Oh, when you're 8, everything's extraordinary, so nothing is. I figured if you forget, they remind you, which was nice. And I never, ever told anyone it would have happened to me, not until I was 45 years old, which is typical of people who have extraordinary experiences. We hold them to our hearts. That's something which I hope will begin to change, frankly, because until we start sharing these experiences, we are not going to be able to help the world understand what reality actually is. But I kept thinking I'd learn about it at church and school. I went to college, and one of the best colleges in the country, and I majored in religion, because I figured by the time you get to college, they'll finally tell you what that is. But I never asked anybody, so no one ever told me. So when I was 20, I was getting very discouraged, because here I was, I had a religion major, and what do you do with that? I couldn't even be a nun, I wasn't Catholic, what could I do? So I came home one night, late in the summer when I turned 20, and I sat down on my bed and I said, I just can't stand this anymore. I felt despairing. And right over my right shoulder, flash in the room, the same light. This time there was beautiful music. It sounded like millions of tiny bells, but they were very loud and melodious. I can't describe the music, it was beautiful. And the same young male voice said, "I will never leave you." So then I felt like the real dunce of the universe. I hadn't really forgotten, I had just kind of forgotten how important that experience had been, because by that time I understood what it was. But that's when I knew we are never, ever alone. People ask me who I think that was. It was my spirit guide. My spirit guide wanted me to be here standing to talk to you today, and we had planned before I was born, you're going to have to remind me what I'm supposed to be doing, and that was the way my spirit guide was doing it. So from then on I became obsessive about trying to understand it, but I still never told anybody. And frankly, in the 50s and 60s, and until wonderful Raymond Moody's Life After Life, there was not a lot of information available. It was there. I was able to find out later. A lot of it had been produced, before I was born, decades before I was born. But we weren't able really to get at it until the early 90s. But nonetheless, I'm not telling anybody. I'm going about my life. And my father, in 1991, had a stroke. It was getting time to graduate. He lived for 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, I lived an hour and a half away. I would drive every morning, spend time with them, and drive back. And one morning, I'm driving, and this was 1991, picked up the car phone, remember car phones, and said, "How did he spend the night?" She didn't want to talk about that. She was giddy. My mother was giddy. And she said, "Oh, something happened, but I can never tell you." I said, "You saw a light, didn't you, Mom?" "How'd you know that?" Well, when I got to my mother's house, I told her, first time I'd ever told anyone, I told her what happened to me when I was 8 years old and again at 20. And she told me basically she had just had the same thing happen. That's when I knew I was not the dunce of the universe. That's when I knew it happens to other people. So I started talking about it. And the more I talked about it, from that day to this, the more I have found this is a common experience. It's common-ish. Much less common than near-death experiences, but a lot of people have this experience or something very similar. And then, only then, being actually a dunce, I guess, did I realize it's in the Bible. Moses, who with the burning bush that's not consumed, and a voice, that's a near-death experience. No, that's a experience of light. It happened to Paul on the way to Tarsus, the light, and then the voice of Jesus saying, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Near-death experiences happen when there is some usually physical distress, but I haven't found anyone who's had an experience of light who was not in spiritual distress. It's a very specific kind of response which the universe gives you, the greater reality gives you if you're in spiritual distress. So then I began much more serious. That was 1991. I was a novelist at that time as well as a lawyer. But after that, I never wrote any more fiction. I practiced law, raised my kids, and I studied the afterlife. As I say, there's a core of information that came over in the late 19th, early 20th century, usually through deep trance mediums, which hardly exist today. We can talk afterwards about why we don't have them then. They had them then, we don't have them now. And channeled communications, abundant evidence. Near-death experiences, deathbed visions. There's so much information. But I was very skeptical. I didn't want to be fooled. A lot of people say, I believe this or that. I don't believe well. I needed to know. So I took this very old information and read it all obsessively and put it together, and it was just like pixel dots on a gigantic puzzle. I say in The Fun of Dying, it was like reading hundreds of accounts by people who over a couple hundred years had traveled to Fiji, some exotic place. They all had very different experiences, but it was really clear they'd all been to the same place. There was one reality. In fact, after reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these accounts, produced over such a long period of time, I can tell you that A, I never found one that didn't fit the big picture. It was like they were filling in a picture that already existed. And B, I never read two that seemed to be repeated. They were all unique. So the odds against chances, scientists like to say, for that are pretty phenomenal. Then I discovered, and I'll tell you how in a minute if this works, I discovered that quantum physics confirms the stuff I had just learned. This was big news. I had a very big advantage in studying quantum physics for dummies books. I never even took physics in high school. I hated the whole idea of it, which was good because I didn't have to unlearn high school physics. I just discovered that, oh my goodness, here are scientists who already know what I have learned, and I'm putting it together. The third thing I discovered, probably should have realized this sooner, I was a very devout Christian even then, and I couldn't bear the thought that there's no evidence, I have to tell you, that sacrificial redemption, which is the core of most Christian churches, happens or that it's needed. So I was kind of, I love Jesus, I was kind of afraid to go and look at the Gospels again, and I did, and I discovered 2,000 years ago, someone walked the earth and told us things about God, reality, death, and the afterlife, which we can confirm now, but we could not have confirmed by any other means for 2,000 years. The odds against chance that the afterlife evidence would all be consistent, and would be consistent with science, and would be consistent with what we learned by studying someone who's fortunately had his words preserved for 2,000 years, the odds against chance that that would all fit are beyond calculation. What I'm going to tell you today is true. But again, don't take my word for it. What I hope that you'll do is begin your own voyage. What I'm telling you basically is where that voyage will take you and how wonderful it's going to be. Here's a very short little summary. There are about 7 levels of afterlife reality. I'll tell you a lot more about them later. And it's 7-ish. 7 is what most researchers assume is true, but it's a band. It's not like stripes. It's more like a rainbow. So they don't sharply divide. But most of those are solid as this. And that's the first thing you say, how is that possible? Well, I'll explain how it's possible and how it works. The second thing that's kind of surprising is dying is easy. And you just easily go from this reality to the next reality. How is that possible? How can your brain even survive once your mind survive once your brain has died? I'll explain how that works. First, here are the answers. This universe and all the afterlife levels are basically an illusion. I know it's a very good illusion, but they're an illusion. They're not objectively real. How can your mind survive? Your mind isn't in your body to begin with. You think you're in your body because, think about it. If you saw the movie Avatar, this may make more sense to you. But you can see out of the eyes, your ears are on the side. It's a really good illusion. But, I can touch this, oh my goodness, and I can move this hand. I must be in this body, right? I'm not. Nobody is. Your mind is with all other minds in spaceless, timeless eternity. So you leave this body easily because you were never in it to begin with. You're just your body is just a meek robot with a two-way radio in its head. That's what it is. Sort of, it's so blunt, but that's what it is. And that's great because it can get old and crumbly and die and it doesn't matter to you because you're going to get a better one, as I'll tell you in a minute. All right, so let's talk about quantum physics a little bit. It's hard for me not to be angry when I talk about quantum physics because the early quantum physicists at the early part of the 20th century figured all this out, and For the past 100 years, their successors have been trying to come up with some explanation for quantum physics that doesn't include God. They can't. Because frankly, God is the only thing that exists. Consciousness is the only thing that exists. But let's go back and look at what some of them said. Carlo Rovelli said, in quantum mechanics, all particles of matter and energy can also be described as waves, and waves have an unusual property. An infinite number of them can exist in the same location. Reality is both infinite in size and smaller than a speck of dust, simultaneously. Space is irrelevant. Reality is a thought. Think about it. How big is a thought? Size is irrelevant. Albert Einstein said, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. He's right. There is no time. Beyond this reality, this universe, there is no time. Sir James Jeans, another physicist, said, the universe begins to look more like a great thought than a great machine. He was right. It is. The only thing that exists is consciousness energy. All right, again, you're looking at me and saying, look, I can feel this. This is real. If you've done any study of physics at all, basically atoms make up matter. Atoms are almost entirely empty space. Even if you're a physicist, you'll say that. For example, if the White House, being where it is and being the size it is, were a nucleus of an atom, its closest orbiting electron could be in Denver. And there's nothing between them. So physicists then always assumed, well, at least those little particles are solid, right? But the closer they study them, the more they find they're vortices of energy. It's just energy, little energy whirls going around, making a bigger energy whirl. Bruce Lipton is wonderful. He's a quantum biologist. He says, and this is a good image, if you could take a teeny, teeny, tiny camera and put it inside an atom, there'd be nothing for it to photograph. There's no particles. So physicists are stubborn. They make these gigantic, multi-billion-dollar colliders and smash atoms together because they're hoping they'll find a solid particle, but they haven't found one yet. I don't think it would matter if they did. It wouldn't change reality, but nonetheless, the point is they don't give up easily. They're going to finally accept what the truth is when they have exhausted every other possibility. The only thing that the evidence tells us is real is this energy-like potentiality that most researchers call consciousness. It holds in suspension the whole illusion. This is a more illusory illusion according to the dead. They say where they are is more real, but basically it's all illusion. When you begin to understand that, and you begin to understand it's basically a thought, and consciousness is all that exists, and you are part of consciousness, and so am I, then you begin to understand something very important. You are eternal. You never began, you're never going to end. You're an eternal being. And to me, don't think of yourself as immortal, because that defines you in terms of death. You can't die. It's impossible to die. In fact, when I counsel people who were thinking about suicide, I say, it's a great idea, except there's one bummer part of it. You can't die. So killing yourself isn't going to help anything, just makes everything worse. Max Planck is the father of quantum theory. In 1918, he received the Nobel Prize for discovering quantum physics. In 1931, he said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. This is the father of quantum theory, by the way. Consciousness is fundamental. Matter is derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything we regard as existing involves consciousness. You'd think that physicists would pay more attention to that, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. He was even more blunt in 1944. He said, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. That mind is the matrix of all matter. He knew this 100 years ago, and they're still trying to catch up with him, but they're basically going a long way around. what I've learned, and the reason this is so familiar and comfortable for me, is that the physics that quantum physicists have found is a variant of the physics that operates in the greater reality that we enter at death and from which we came, where we spend most of eternity. The physics there is pure quantum physics. You can go from any place to any place across the universe in an eye blink of time. You can, there's actually no time, in fact. There's no space, there's no sense of any distance, and mind creates everything. People who are there tell us that you want to build a house, and I'll tell you more about this in a minute. All you do is you design it, and then you call in more advanced beings who are more used to being able to use their minds, and they make it shimmer into existence, and it's solid and it's permanent. And it's a whole lot easier than using hammer and nails. Doesn't this change everything we know about reality? Think about it. Our whole lives we've bought into the illusion. I'm trying to help you get outside it, because once you're outside it, all the rest of this will make sense. So what happens when you die? The best analogy I can make is to a television set. Your mind is that television set. Right now it's picking up the universe channel. Right? And you're into it, you're enjoying it, but comes the time to die. Your mind simply shifts to a higher channel. And it picks up a whole new solid reality, just as solid as this one is. That's why death is so easy. You're not in either reality. Your mind is never in any of these realities. They're just experiences your mind is having. All right, now let's talk about the process of dying. Not long ago, last summer actually, Steve Jobs died. And I don't know if you know what his last words were. About 12 hours before he actually transitioned, his sister in his eulogy said he was lying there looking at the faces of his family, sort of memorizing them, trying to stay conscious. And suddenly his eyes lifted, looked beyond them, and he said, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." And he never spoke in this plane again. What did he see? I'll tell you what he saw. All right, so let's say, just parenthetically, we each make between 2 or 3 possible exit points as part of our lives. We write a lesson plan for our lives. We don't come in here unprepared. And we figure out when, maybe one in their 20s, one in the 40s, one in the 80s, 70s, whatever. We figure out 2 or 3 lesson point breaks where we figure we'll have learned about enough, because we want to boogie out of here as soon as possible. We don't want to stay. And so when one of these is approaching and your higher consciousness has chosen to take that exit point, you're dying. So there you are dying. And what happens sometime within the 2 weeks before you die, for Steve Jobs it was late, it's usually before 12 hours before death, you start to see people in your room. The people that you see are always going to be, or pets, could be pets too. They're always people or pets that you most trust. Not the ones you love the most, but who in your life would you most trust and follow? And they appear usually in the upper corners of the room. They're solid, they look normal, they're smiling, they're happy. If they died old, they're young. If they died maimed, they're whole. And they're happy, and they're saying, guess what? We're going to go on a little trip, and it's going to be fun. And as soon as this happens, most of the dying, as soon as they really become invested in what they're seeing, most of them stop talking to the living, but they lie gazing, usually at a corner of the room. They're talking in their minds with their visitors. And that's what Steve Jobs saw. And that's when suddenly you know it's going to be okay. Because there's your grandfather, whoever you trust most, there's your cat from childhood, whoever you, and sometimes it's a crowd, but usually it's just one or a few, because they want you to focus on those people and trust them. I'm going to do a little digression here, because there's something happened in my life relatively recently that is important, and it's about deathbed visitors. My mother is the only person I've ever read about in my entire life who decided not to leave at her last exit point. We all know decrepit old people, but let me tell you her story just briefly. She was 88. Oh, talking decrepit, she's about to turn 93. She was 88, and I got the call from the hospital, get in the plane, come to Boston, she's dying. So I did, and the doctor explained to me why she couldn't possibly survive. She was in terminal end-stage heart failure. but she got better. And she had been in a coma. As she started to come out of it, she said, you know, my parents were here. And I said, oh, tell me about it. This is my deal. I want to hear. And she told me her parents had come. Her father had sat down in the chair. Sometimes they do come and walk around in the room. Sometimes they stay in the corners. And he had said it's time to go. And my mother apparently said, I don't think so. So her mother said, well, you'd better take your medicine then, as mothers will do. This is all coming from my mom. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because clearly at 88, which is what she was then, that's her last, nobody would have planned that as a middle exit point. So what happens next? I was kind of interested at this point. Well, I found out a little bit later that it actually had been her last planned exit point. A couple months later, she was in rehab. I went to visit her, and she said, they're going to let me stay longer. I said, how do you know that? She said, the man told me. I said, what man? She told me the previous night, a tall, glowing being had walked into her hospital room and had said, we decided that since you want to stay, we're going to let you stay a little longer. That's how she reported what he said, and then walked out. My jaw dropped. She doesn't know what that was. I do. That's a very high-level being. When they appear to us physically on Earth, they glow. They look like tall, thin, usually male or androgynous creatures that glow. So she really did live past her planned exit point, and now I'm getting to have the unfortunate experience of watching what happens when they do that. And it's not pleasant, I must tell you. But that's just an aside. If you know someone who is 88 and is dying, I would help them. Not in a physical way, but I would certainly encourage them. Give them my book. Call me or write me and I'll send it to you for free. Help them understand there's nothing to be afraid of, because my mother's bottom fear is she's terrified to die. She would never tell you that. But she's so afraid that she's willing to stay in this horrible body. And right now, her body is so depleted that she is very seldom in it. She sleeps almost all the time. So I know the good news is she's with my dad and my grandparents and her siblings most of the time. But the bad news is she's left this messiness behind of her body still here. That's my personal digression. Okay, so you're seeing your deathbed visitors, and you know it's time to go, and they're telling you, we're going to show you how much fun this is. So what happens when you die? Those who have been there say this is what happens. Your bodies start to separate. You're built like Russian dolls, Matryoshka dolls, I think they're called, which means you're nested bodies, all of them made of energy. One of them looks physical because it's tuned to the same vibratory level as the universe. So that's the physical body we can see. There is one which I think is outer, which is an energy level, body that protects you from bad spirits and stuff. And those two seem to stay behind. But what's inside separates gradually. They say it feels like tiny threads separating, starting at the feet. And basically your energy gathers into the upper part of your body, your chest and your head, and leaves. It seems to leave, I used to believe it always left through the fontanelle at the top of your head, but it seems to come out either through your chest or your head. Those who have seen it happen say it looks like a mist. And the mist forms into the shape of you. Very commonly, it's lying in the air face down above you, still attached by this glowing cord, energy cord that has kept your body alive all this time. And but sometimes it's cross-legged, sometimes it tips down and stands on the floor, and it's naked as a jaybird. We enter the world naked and we leave it that way too. But when you notice that, you go, oh my goodness, and immediately you've got clothes on. Your body generates clothing. You're attached by what we call a silver cord, which is a glowing energy cord, which is infinitely, during your lifetime, it has gone to the ends of the universe and back. We can talk about this afterwards if you like, but everybody's an out-of-body traveler. We spend a tremendous amount of time out of body when we're asleep. And the cord keeps our body alive while we're doing that. But when it's time to die, that cord becomes stretchy and kind of brittle at some points in it. And people who've seen it happen say it just seems to kind of disintegrate into nothing. When that happens, that's your actual moment of death. Or your body's actual moment. It's your moment of freedom. Think about how this feels. You've been trapped in a decrepit shell, lying there, and suddenly you're free. You feel young, you feel healthy, you feel powerful, and there are all your loved ones around you. You feel dynamic and terrific. But in reality, it's a very dangerous time. because you have no idea really what's going on. I mean, this is all new to you. No one's taught you this. So here's the first bit of advice I'm going to give you. Go with your rescuers. Because especially if your death was not expected, your loved ones around the bed are feeling for the pulse that's on the body. Oh, there's no pulse. Oh, he's dead. Oh, she's dead. Oh, what are we going to do? They're crying. They're upset. And you feel great. So you're saying, you want to say, I'm right here, everybody. I'm fine. And focus on them. If you focus on them, you will lose the ability to go where you're supposed to go. There are, in older buildings all over the earth, there are people who made the mistake of not going, and they're stuck in time. They're earthbound. You don't want that to happen. So go with them. You can help your family from the other side. You can't help them from here. So you wisely say, I'm going to just boogie on out of here, leaving, here I go, bye world. When you look back at your deathbed scene, we're told that it starts to look colorless, vague, shimmery. You know how you think it would look if you look from here into the afterlife? Well, when you look back, it looks that way. It gets vague and shimmery, and then it just disappears. You're in a foggish kind of for a few minutes, or a minute. Time doesn't exist at this point, so who knows how long. But you're still with your rescuers, and then when it clears, you're in the most beautiful place you could possibly imagine. It's indescribably beautiful. I'll get there in a few minutes. I'll tell you what it looks like to those who are there. Sometimes people will fall asleep here and wake up there. If they wake up, it's either in a hospital if they've been damaged, or it's in a beautiful version of a home that they loved on earth, usually, with their relatives and loved ones around them. And those who have been at these waking up scenes say, we have so much trouble convincing them they're dead because they feel great and it looks normal around them, looks like the earth. So they have to take them outside and really help them understand where they are. We all soon have some variant of two experiences. We have a party and we're judged. But sometimes we die with a damaged body. And it's so damaged that we believe that we're still damaged even after death. And because our bodies there are mind created, usually we look young and beautiful. I know exactly how I want to look. But if we think we're damaged, then we're going to make a damaged body afterwards, and that can't work. So wonderfully, if you aren't able to make a perfect body because of this, they do surgery on you. They take you to what you think is an operating room, and around you are people you think are doctors, and they say, oh, we can see you have a problem, you're missing a hand. Well, we can fix it. We're not even going to put you under, we'll let you watch. Local anesthetic, and they sew a hand on. And then you know you're okay, so you leave, you're fine, and you have a whole body. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes they try other things. One story I tell in The Fun of Dying is about a World War I victim, someone who died in World War I, and before he died, he had a genital injury, which was very upsetting to him. And he still thought he had that genital injury. A lot of the things I'll tell you are World War I vintage, right? Because a lot of these people who were communicating in the early part of the 20th century had died in some way in World War I. But nothing works. They counseled him, nothing worked. So finally, they put him to sleep in a great big bed. Surgery, nothing worked. Put him to sleep in a great big bed, and a beautiful woman was next to him when he woke up. And he discovered everything worked just fine, and he was able to go on and feel happy and whole. That's the only account I can ever recall reading of physical sex after death. They don't do it, and we can talk later about why. There are a lot of reasons why. But nonetheless, they're going to make sure they treat the people who help us right after we transition, treat this as a horrible, tough duty. You come over damaged, physically, mentally, emotionally. They're trying to help you heal. And the things that happen around that time are designed to help you heal. The party and the judgment. Let's talk about judgment. This is something that looms large in people's minds. Everybody gets judged. What happens is they take you either to, there's apparently a big stone building with beautiful big stone rooms and a globe in the middle, which is like holographic, and a bench with counselors and stuff, and you go in there with your guides, and you get to see every event of your life, either from now backward or from birth forward. I think it's usually in reverse. You get to feel again every emotion you ever felt, but what's really horrible is you get to feel how you made everybody else feel. And people who've been there and had this happen say it's the worst thing you can ever imagine going through. They say they can They were expecting the bad things, the time they put the cat in the microwave, things like that were horrible, but they knew they were going to be there, and they sort of were steeled for that. The part that they found, many people have found so horrendous, was how careless they had been, how many times they had said or done something thoughtless, or had just plain ignored somebody who could easily have been helped by them with just a little effort. And believe me, when I understood how important this was, I cleaned up my act like you cannot believe. Because if you do only good stuff, you're going to have a much better life review. You're asked after the life review to forgive all those people. I have never, in decades of reading nearly 200 years of evidence, I've never found a single case of somebody who didn't forgive. Everybody. Everybody. People who died in Auschwitz, people who were murdered, their whole families were murdered, horrible things, they forgive like that. Because they know basically it was all a game. Everybody's fine. I guess that's why. I don't even know why. I'm just telling you, they don't ever have a problem forgiving. But the part that's awful is, it's hard to forgive yourself. That's when they really snap into action. They give us a tremendous amount of counseling and help so that we can try to get through this awful feeling that we failed, or that we let ourselves, we let the world down. I mean, it's a horrible feeling to think you planned this life of doing good and you fell short. Most people forgive themselves. Apparently, that's what seems. If you don't forgive yourself, your energy level starts to drop. We all have a certain spiritual energy level, and we are attracted to the level of the afterlife to which our spiritual development suits us. And I'll tell you in a minute where most of us end up, and where you can end up if you are unable to keep up your spiritual energy level. So I'll say toward the end, the easiest way to address this is to learn to forgive while on earth. The most important thing anybody can do is learn how to forgive no matter what people do to you, because you'll find it a lot easier when the moment comes that you have to forgive yourself. Okay, let's talk about what it's like to be there. As I said, there are 7 levels roughly of reality that exist exactly where we are, all in the same place. So the people that you love are right here. They're separated from you in the same way channel 2 is separated from channel 9. Different energy levels, that's all. Now, it's hard to communicate, isn't it, across energy levels. You don't see that happening on your television. The same is true for us. That's why it's so hard for the dead to communicate with us. But nevertheless, they do. That could be a whole other conversation, all the different ways that the dead are communicating with us, that they basically learned over the years to make work. I skipped your party. Let me just say quickly, a party is very variable. Some people have a blowout party. Some people, like my husband, is very quiet. A few friends and a chamber orchestra. That's what they have. We don't eat there, but there's often food at these parties because people are used to eating and thinking that means celebration or festivity. One of the things that people often talk about is the fact that when they have their party, and everybody's, it's like Hold Home Week, everybody comes to see you. When they have their party, a lot of the people who greet them are people that they didn't get along with in life. Even some of their worst enemies turn out to be really great eternal friends who had chosen as part of their spiritual growth, and you and they basically worked out they were going to be your nasty brother-in-law or whoever and help both of you to grow. Spiritual growth seems to be a lot like going to the gym. If you don't exercise, if there's no tension, you don't exercise those muscles, you don't develop your muscles. To develop your spiritual muscles, you need the same kind of tension among people, and the people we love most will come in and give us that gift of helping us do that. The lowest afterlife level, right against the level of the earth. The earth seems to be the very lowest, or the universe. Right above that is the afterlife level that we call the outer darkness. We get that term, of course, from Jesus. He talked about the outer darkness. And it's horrendous. It's cold, dark, dank, smelly, full of demons who are actually people who think they're demons. You don't ever want to go there in your worst nightmare. But that's what it is. Just above that is level 2. It's a little better. The light is still dim, but people are basically recovering or just having, they're learning and dealing with it in level 2. Levels 3 through 5 are what the Vikings called the Summerland. They're beautiful. The descriptions are just almost impossible to believe. Think of and again, it's very culturally dependent. So let me just say, I'm talking about like the North American / English Summerland, which is where most of this evidence that I've read comes from. Beautiful vistas, flowers are abundant in colors you can't imagine because they're not governed by the visible light spectrum, intense green grass, beautiful trees, distant vistas of lakes and mountains and beautiful hills. Your senses are so much better. This is one thing they remark on. You can hear so much better there, and you can see so well that they say, one fellow said, you know, it looks like about 50 miles away are these beautiful snow-capped mountains, and there are hills against the mountains. I can see every leaf on every tree on each of those hills. That's how good my eyesight is. He was very surprised by that. The flowers don't fade. They're alive. They're alive in a way which we cannot imagine. They're loving. They'll turn their face toward you as you pass. They're permanent. They don't ever fade. They give off energy, and they give off a beautiful music as well as a lovely scent. So people there don't nourish their bodies with food. You don't have internal organs apparently, so if you eat, the food just disappears anyway. But people will put their face into flowers and inhale that energy. It's in the air. The trees, they say, will caress you as you go by. They'll just reach a branch down and caress you. It's hard for us to imagine loving vegetation, but that's what we're surrounded by there. And it's permanent. I'm going to have lots of gardens because you don't have to weed, you don't have to tend. It's easy. It's like pets. Let me just give you a little hint. One of the few things we're most certain about is every pet you've ever loved is there. They are waiting for you. They're all young and healthy. There are reports of people really annoyed because someone they were waiting for anxiously, some close dear loved one, had finally arrived, and they came to greet this person, and they couldn't get through all these stupid dogs and cats which were all around and were the first ones to greet. It had to all be petted, and then they would go off and play. And they don't have to be walked, and they don't have to be fed. So I'm going to have pets there. I can hardly wait. Fortunately, there are people who have loved enough animals on Earth that they share, so you can have as many pets as you want there. And they basically go from house to house, apparently. Not just dogs and cats, but all kinds of animals that people have loved. Farm animals, circus animals. As I say in The Fun of Dying, the lion does lie down with the lamb there because there's no fear, there's nothing between them. And I'm wondering if that phrase in the Bible doesn't come from a glimpse of the Summerland. Horses, a lot of horses there that people have loved. My horse is there. I saw him in a visitation dream. Oh, does he look good now? He died when he was almost 30. So there's a lot of things we can do there. I'll talk about those in a minute. But let's first talk about the houses, which are remarkable. Here again, Jesus had it right. He said, in my Father's house are many mansions, and he was going to go build one for his followers. Well, that's exactly what happens. The first of a couple to die will typically build their house. Not with hammer and nails, and not even thinking it into existence himself. He basically describes it and draws it out, and upper level beings make it appear. They're not exactly the same because sometimes the spouse screws it up a little bit, but they're real. They're as solid as any other house. Yeah, there's some funny stories about that I tell in The Fun of Dying about how the husbands usually, how they're the ones there first, have screwed up the house. And the wives are sure to tell us about it. But we don't need a place to live. Night never falls unless we want it. We can have night if we want it. It never rains. We can have that too if we want it. Where we never sleep, no need to sleep, we never get tired, and we really don't even need shelter. It always feels a perfect temperature. It feels like the most beautiful possible formal gardens extending forever at a perfect temperature, and you can be in them forever and do whatever you want. So there's really no need for a house. But people who have just died want a house, they have a place, need a place for what they want around them, their stuff. Here's another secret. You get to take it with you. I know you didn't believe that. Let me just tell you this. The dead remark that whatever they miss from the earth, they just think, gee, I wish I had that toy I lost when I was 4 years old, and it's right there in the house. Some book they want, anything they want is right there. I'm not sure why that happens, but isn't it extraordinary? You can take it with you in spades. What can we do there? Well, these people who died in the early part of the 20th century were generally poor people. Many of them wanted to learn to play instruments or to sing or to paint. And they were exultant to tell us they were learning from, to paint for Michelangelo or sculpt, or Mozart was teaching them to play the piano. A lot of them wanted to do needlework, tapestry. They were learning from extraordinary artists to do these things. One fellow who was a very advanced being, even though he had recently died, said he was on level 5 learning how to make flowers. They were literally making these flowers and one by one, and then putting them in these beautiful displays. He said he made a flower, it looked horrendous. He tried to make a tulip and he made a mess of it. All the while his teacher is making beautiful, beautiful flowers. I should tell you another thing about which I sort of usually talk about when I talk about the vegetation, something else which again is extraordinary in that it's confirmed by Jesus. The water there is alive. There's water everywhere. But the people who are there say it feels like silk. It's not wet. You can walk into a lake and walk out of it dry. And people do that because they can get wonderful energy from that water. It gives off a beautiful, medicine, music, and it gives off this gorgeous energy. Jesus said to the woman at the well, if you knew who it is that asked you for a drink, you would have asked, and he would have given you living water. He knew. He knew all this stuff. It's incredible to me that we have a witness 2,000 years ago who told us stuff we could only learn now. You can dress as you like. Many people there for a while wear their earth clothes because they feel comfortable in whatever they wore. So you can see a few people there in almost any century's garb. But after a while, people stop caring what they wear, so they wear what they call spirit robes, and you guessed it, they look like angels. It's a tunic, floor length, long sleeves, belt, and some of them wear a cape or a hat. And the color, the details, the fact that they're wearing a cape or a hat are all reflective of their spiritual status. If you don't like hierarchy, we're going to hierarchy. There's a strict spiritual hierarchy. If you've earned a place on level 4 or level 5 or level 6, you'll look fancier. And people can tell immediately looking at you that you're a more advanced being. Now, if we saw that here, what would be our reaction? We'd say, he thinks he's hot stuff, doesn't he? Look at that. But they don't feel that way. No, I've never seen anybody except one or two, which I can tell you about if you like, who had just gone over and who had been very high status here, and it was a whole different ballgame there, and they were trying to figure out how to game the system. Other than that, people respect. They know how hard it is to achieve that kind of spiritual growth, and they respect these people who appear as teachers in the lower levels. Level 3 seems to be where most people stay most of the time. Or a lot of people do, because everybody in your family is very likely to be of a level able to be at level 3. Level 4, maybe 2. By the time you're at level 5 and above, it's harder to be there. It's harder to, because you'd think you could sneak in, but they tell us you can't. They say that what happens is, if you're a level 3 being and you want to be on level 4 or level 5, you can go there, but it's unbearable. It's like the energy is pounding you. They say it just feels overwhelming. They can't breathe, and they're very uncomfortable. You can visit, though. Upper level beings are able, with their own energy, to shield you and take you so you can see what's there, which I think is kind of exciting. I've seen very rare reports that they can even go as high as level 6 and possibly even level 7. But let's finish talking about the levels. So level 3 through 5 are gradations of this beautiful, beautiful Earth-like place. Very culturally dependent. So if you were to go to the, Arabic or the Chinese or any other summer land, it would look different. It would look like the culture looks. So it's a familiar, welcoming place for people who graduate from Earth. Level 6 is mostly not material. Apparently they can have material if they want it, but most people there are past caring about anything material. It's just blissful energy. And apparently that's enough for them. I cannot even imagine. If you can have all that Summerland stuff, but again, I'm not that high a level, so maybe by then it makes sense. But the top level is the celestial level, which is where all the light comes from. There's a beautiful, beautiful light there. If you've had a near-death experience, you've seen the light. When I was a child, I saw that light. It's bright white. It's brilliant. And it's so beautiful. And the higher you go in those levels, the more intense the light is. much brighter than sunlight. It's diffuse, there's no shadows because there's no solar body. There are no stars unless you want them. It's just this constant diffuse white light. And they tell us that light comes from the top level, the highest energy level, which is where theoretically God is. That's where they say God is. But frankly, everything's God. So I guess that's just the center or focus of God. You can have any sport you want. I have a friend right now who's in spirit, who's communicating through afterlife for us, which I'll talk about in a moment. And he loves to snowboard. And he snowboards there. That's what he likes to do. There are people who like all kinds of sports. But it's funny. What appears to be the case is that they play group sports, but when they play football, the purpose is to help everybody else win. It's a totally different focus than we have here, because the whole focus is to learn to grow spiritually. You can even have motor vehicles there if you want them. There are reports of people having cars or planes or helicopters, but people usually almost immediately get sick of them because you don't need any of that. You can go anywhere you want just by thinking. You communicate telepathically, which means that it is possible, apparently, once you learn to do it, to talk to anybody, no matter what their language was on Earth. You can converse with anyone, which is kind of nice. I know some people I'm dying to talk to if I can get their attention. One of the things that was big in the early part of the 20th century was symphonies. Now, we don't much care, many of us, for symphonies now, but they had beautiful, huge amphitheaters. Remember, it's always daylight, and you could go and hear Mozart's current work or whatever. People that the composers were still composing, they said not only is the music better, then you can hear it better, but it also appears as colors above the orchestra when they really get playing. Still, that isn't as exciting to me as some other players would be. So what I've read, I've done a little dabbling more recently in more recent literature, now that I kind of have set what actually happens. Modern performers now perform in the Summerland for us. 3 names I've heard are Sinatra, John Lennon, and especially Elvis. Apparently Elvis could go higher, but he decided to stay at level 3. So everybody who graduates who was his fan gets to see him and meet him in person. So bless his heart. I have a sense maybe John Lennon would do that too, but they make a point of saying that's what Elvis is doing. What have I not seen? I've never seen an atheist. Everybody who has died knows immediately what the game is. Some of them don't like it. I have seen that when they first graduate. They hate being wrong, but there's nobody there who denies that, at least I've never read anybody who denied that God is real. I've never seen a hell or a devil. I think I don't think that could be wrong. People who I've said that to have said, yeah, but the devil can hide. That's the devil's big trick. Here's the problem the devil would have. Spiritual energy is the only energy, the only real energy. What we think of as energy here is just a correlate of matter, which is an illusion. Real energy, the more good the energy is, the more powerful it is. As I say, it's a hierarchy, but it's that way because the more good you are, the more powerful your energy is. The more bad you are, the more nefarious your intentions are, the lower your energy is. It appears that the most evil beings that exist are shadow men, which do exist. They're basically earthbound beings which have so little energy that the only thing they can do, and they usually appear as very tall, thin men in top hats. Usually there's a top hat. And they hide in closets to scare children. Because they feed off fear. That's the only way they have any energy at all. Now that's pathetic. Sad for the kids, but if you let your kids have a nightlight, they'll become old enough not to be able to see the shadow men before long. But that's why I know there's no powerful negative energy in opposition to God. It's not possible. All right, let's talk about what can go wrong, because I think it's important to know this. And the most common problem that people have who are dying is that they have a fixed belief about what's coming next. Don't take what I'm saying seriously, literally. Just assume that it's going to be wonderful and follow your visitors and you'll be fine. But if you have a fixed idea, clouds or whatever you think, tent with virgins in it, doesn't matter. Whatever your fixed insistence in your mind is, you're going to go to that reality, but it'll be an illusion within the greater illusion. It's not real. It's less real than anything else is. And there are tales of people who, clouds are the most common one for Westerners. Sometimes they have the gates, sometimes they don't, but people basically walk around looking and feeling confused until they get rescued. Your relatives and your guides will rescue you, but why go in a detour if you don't have to? Other things can go wrong. Around the turn of the previous century, a lot of people were being told they would sleep until there was a final trumpet. So you know what they did? They went to sleep. And there were hospitals at that time full of people who were drowsy or fully asleep, and those people would sleep, and they tried to wake them up with dignity, because how embarrassing this is going to be. But nonetheless, every so often, they would gather the loved ones around the beds and blow a trumpet, and everybody would wake up. That's all unnecessary. The worst problem that you can possibly have is not forgiving. If you are really yourself, if you haven't forgiven yourself, if you die feeling horrendously guilty, you may not even make it to the Summerland. You may go right to that lowest level and condemn yourself. There are a lot of people in the outer darkness. Every single person there has condemned himself there. I've never seen the slightest bit of evidence that the condemning entity is anything but the person himself. So you've got to learn how to forgive, for sure. The afterlife evidence tells us that the universe exists for one reason. It's kindergarten for us. Maybe not quite, maybe it's nursery school. We're here to learn how to love and forgive. That's all. That's the reason we're here. I think there are other things more advanced beings are learning here. I don't know what they are, though. Over and over again. And again, Jesus said this too. Learn to love, learn to forgive. It's very, very important. That's why you're here. I think loving is easy. Think about it. I mean, I've tried some exercises, which we can talk about if you like afterwards, learning how to extend love to all the earth. It is natural to us. You have to fight that impulse to love, and it's easy to develop. Forgiving is another matter. Everybody in your life, no matter what they did to you, no matter how despicable they may be, it's your job. They are here purely as a lesson for you so you can learn how to forgive. Maybe you're a more advanced being and they gave you a harder lesson, or you gave yourself a harder lesson. You've got to stretch that muscle. You've got to learn how to forgive. But start out with easy stuff. I've decided that the most efficient way to learn how to forgive is driving. I think that God designed cars specifically as our best forgiveness opportunity. Think about it. People cut you off in traffic, you're going to get all tense, that's so-and-so. Well, if instead you relax and you throw, what I used to, when I started doing this, I would immediately think, oh, the poor man, his child is dying, he's hurrying to the hospital, oh, I hope he gets there in time. And if you really make yourself, you'll grit your teeth the first time you do this. But very quickly, within literally weeks, that'll be your instinct. Whenever you see a bad driver, oh, he's trying to get to the hospital. I hope his kids make it. I'm sure they're in some horrible accident. Oh, I just hope it works out. And then you start loving them, and you start smiling at them, and that really freaks them out. But that's okay, because it's you who needs to have this forgiveness lesson. They drive by, they give you the finger. You think, oh, the poor man, he's got only one finger. I sure hope he gets the others back. You see how it works? Life is the story you tell yourself. Tell yourself a story that will help you love and forgive the world. Because if you keep doing this, it'll become natural. And you'll always be loving and forgiving. And when you do that, you'll be ready for the opportunities that there are on the other side. People ask me, I want to get to those higher levels. How do I get there? We start at the bottom. And we start with learning to forgive and learning to love here. Once we've learned that, we can go on and learn more advanced things. Apparently, in the afterlife levels, learning to love and to forgive is very hard. Here, it's easy, they tell us. So it's just up to us to try to learn it. Of course, the more you learn about death, the more you realize that learning about death is not about learning about dying after all, is it? It's not. It's about learning how to live. That's what it's really about. You're here because you, before you were born, chose this opportunity to learn to love and forgive. Everybody is here by choice. Everybody is here with a carefully laid out plan and with the help of guides and a tremendous amount of love and effort invested in your life. And that's true of everybody you know, by the way, and everybody you don't know. So you look at the people you see differently when you understand that each is a part of God, each is a powerful, eternal being, and we're all one being. There is really only one of us here. We only think we're separate. When you understand that that's true, you really do see the world differently. Knowing the truth turns what is really tragic, life, into what is really comic. This joy of eternal living. For many people, it's life sucks, then you die. But when you know the truth, you realize this is just a tiny minute out of an eternity, which is your eternal life, and you want to make the most of it. Advanced beings tell us we shouldn't even be trying to figure all this stuff out yet. I mean, they want us, we can talk about this afterward too if you like. There are reasons why they're letting us know this now, and they're pretty serious reasons. But they tell us just concentrate on your lessons, trust that all the lessons to come in your eternal life are all going to be enjoyable and worth the effort because the whole universe is designed for your ultimate good. Now, I've been trying to help people and educate people about all of this for the last year. And one of the things that we've done is to start a forum, and I can't buy my cards, sorry. There are cards in the back which are... Okay. Please pick one of these up, because Afterlife Forums was started a year ago as a place to talk about all this stuff. The cards are out there. Just come in and join us, at least read, because everybody there, by now, every possible question has been asked and answered. And we're getting quite a lot of traffic after a year, and it's exciting. I go there as often as I can to answer questions, and now there are some wonderful other people who have spent a lot of time researching this, and some of them know it innately, I got to tell you, who are answering questions there too. Now, I'd be happy to answer questions. And right toward the end, I'm going to tell you one more story. I'm going to tell you how this book got to be written. I didn't tell the story of how it got to be written for a year because, well, when you hear the story, you'll understand why. But does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Okay, 2 questions. And that is, what is the reason that the higher level beings are giving us this information now? And you said that it's harder to forgive in the upper levels, so that means to me that, like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'll answer the second question first. Why is it hard to learn to forgive in the afterlife levels?
In the upper levels.
Or in any of the upper or lower? Because everything there is sweetless light, joy, beauty, love. There's no tension. Basically you're sitting in the gym and there's no instruments to use to strengthen your muscles. And then the other question is, why are we being allowed to know this now? There's a lot of evidence that starting sometime in the middle of the 20th century, and we suspect it's tied to the fact that we started blowing up atomic bombs. There's been a concerted effort in all the afterlife levels and in the other planets as well that are inhabited to raise the consciousness of the Earth fast, because we have advanced technologically far faster than we've advanced spiritually. And while that makes for a very good school, it makes for a very greatly increased risk that we will blow the planet up. They don't want us to do that because it's too useful. I'm sorry, and then next. Yes?
Are you familiar with the works of the great direct voice medium, Leslie Flint?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Maurice Chevalier in his recordings and Ellen Terry, they confirm everything that you just said.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you've heard those recordings. Yeah.
Well, no, I haven't heard those recordings, actually. I'm familiar with them, but remember, I'm of this narrow one-trick pony. But the truth is the truth. One of the great things about doing this work, and I should just say, the question he asked was I familiar with Leslie Flint, and that channeled beings through him had confirmed. He's a deep trance medium, one of the very few. And they had confirmed what I'm saying. One of the things that I've learned, and has been a great joy to me, is whenever I meet someone who has been doing this work for a long time, we complete each other's sentences. I've never met anybody who's done this work who hasn't come to exactly the same conclusions I have, which is another validation, when you think about it, of the truth. Yes?
You haven't mentioned reincarnation.
Okay, I haven't, yes.
There are some questions about it.
I haven't mentioned reincarnation because they tell us, forget about it, it happens, but it doesn't happen anything like what you all think, and you will never understand it if we tell you. Well, here's the problem. Time is an illusion. It doesn't exist. So in some way that we cannot fathom and that makes my eyes cross to think about it, all our lives are happening at the same time. And they're actually influencing one another. So one very advanced being said, think of reincarnation as a bucket out of which each lifetime is dipped and back into which each lifetime is poured. So that's how I think about it. I'm sorry, you had a follow-up question on that? No? That's fine. Yes?
My own experience was in 1969, and I was very blessed to go to the light and become a vibration. I did not, after my life review, meet people. I was the vibration.
This lady has said that she went to the light and she became a vibration. She didn't meet people. When people have near-death experiences and come back, if they have extensive ones, they usually reach a point where they're told if you go any farther, you will not be able to come back. It usually is that people who have near-death experiences have extraordinary experiences, but they don't. If you end up fully in the Summerland, it's irrevocable. That seems to be irrevocable. Yes?
I did have the life review.
Yes.
But I was pregnant at the time, and a thought that I was to give this child life.
She was pregnant at the time she had her life review, and it was important that she give the child life. A lot of people come back for other people. In fact, if you're trying to bargain, don't tell me you want to come back because you really enjoy, riding your bike. Tell me you want to come back for your children, and they'll let you come back much more often. Yes?
At the beginning, you mentioned sacrificial redemption and Jesus. Could you say more about that?
I don't want to interfere with anybody's voyage. My husband is a very strict Catholic. We've been married 39 years. I respect his views. I'm telling you, having studied this for decades, I have never seen one instance of God ever judging anybody. I have seen repeated evidence that it doesn't matter what your religion is during life. And I have seen abundant evidence that sacrificial redemption, Jesus died for your sins, is not the reason Jesus came. It just isn't. So I'm no longer a traditional Christian. I think of myself as an originalist Christian. I follow the teachings of Jesus, which seems to be what he intended. Yes? Yes.
Two questions. Do you think that, speaking of vibrational things, do you think that the earth itself is a living being that has a consciousness and is going through an evolutionary thing, and are we helping it in that respect? And then the second question I had is, you said that sometimes spiritual masters would come to this or a higher level. Do like people from or entities from the 5th and 6th levels or whatever come down to the earth occasionally, like was Buddha or Jesus one of those types of people?
My mom saw one. And believe me, there was nobody less spiritual than my mother. Yes, the question is, do upper level beings come to the earth? And the answer is yes, all the time. And the consciousnesses that have come as Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, all of these great teachers are, of course, from God. The other question, they're part of God, but they've come to try to raise the consciousness of their time. And they do it in the words of their time. When you think about it, Jesus came to Iron Age primitives, and he tried to speak to them in a very simple way, which fortunately still resonates with us today, but wouldn't be probably the way he would talk to us. The other question is the earth conscious. Here's an insight. Everything seems to be conscious. We know for sure that plants react to our thoughts. And that's boggled me so much that for years I wouldn't eat my salad. I don't like salad anyway, it was a good excuse. But I think that the religion closest to what would probably be correct was the Native American belief that spirit is in everything. Spirit is in everything. But I also want to add that all that I've read suggests that the universe, not just the earth, but the universe exists for our spiritual growth. That's why it exists. We are part of God. We are important beyond anything you can possibly imagine. We are infinitely loved and precious. So don't sacrifice people for the earth. Sacrifice everything to help every human being grow spiritually, because that's the whole point of it.
I just thought maybe we had a symbiotic relationship, or maybe we were helping.
You have a symbiotic relationship with everything. Everything is connected.
Well, no, I understand.
We're all part of the same thought. Yeah, but yes. I agree with that. Yes, someone over here, yes?
I was wondering if you believe that, well, the gentleman asked about reincarnation, and I've always felt and heard that you keep coming back to do it right, kind of a thing. In other words, reincarnation, and that you're supposed to watch your previous life, and when you're ready to go back to be reborn. And I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe that I recall several of my previous lives.
This is a question about reincarnation, and are we keeping coming back till we get things right? We are all of our lives are being lived at the same time. The history of human civilization is all happening simultaneously. Time doesn't exist. I don't understand it any better than you do. But, for example, those who pioneer past life regression, which works to solve phobias and things, can also, if they don't find the problem in a past life, they can do future life progression just as easily, and people can see what their future life is. It is not linear. We so imperfectly understand reincarnation, it's hard to even talk about it or generalize about it. But I think there is evidence that our life, your life now, can very much improve the life you lived in the year 1202 and the year you're going to live in the year 2800. Those lives are advancing simultaneously in some way I cannot even fathom.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you had a question too?
Hi, when you're praying to people who have passed on, or when you're talking to them, are you pulling them into a lower vibration? Is it kind of unfair to say, Grandma, help me do this? Or,
The question is, are we pulling people into a lower vibration when we talk to them and ask them for help? I don't think we can pull them into a lower vibration. There is evidence that the higher they advance and the longer they've been away from the earth, the harder it is for them to communicate with the earth. And there's also evidence that if you're in very great grief, you can hold beings who have passed on close to the earth. You really need to let go of the grief in order to let them progress. But just asking them to communicate or to help you, that doesn't cause a problem. Yes?
Is there any way we can help family members who have possibly progressed only to the outer darkness, the second level?
Yes. Send them love. Think love and send them love. There's tremendous effort being made to help everybody who's there. It turns out it's like a tourist stop when we first get there. We do a lot of travel, and a lot of people want to go see it. So an upper level being or two will go with them and will show them the outer darkness and how horrendous it is. And those who are most loving will sometimes want to help those people. But the outer darkness is full of very advanced beings who are trying to reach and comfort each of those lost souls, most of whom have a lot of trouble even noticing the good around them. An outer darkness story that I tell in The Fun of Dying is about the Holocaust. Apparently, those who carried out the Holocaust are in horrendous torment because they knew better, and they did horrible things. And they are surrounded by rescuers trying to help them. There's a story told of a guard who had put himself in an iron box, and he can just be heard wailing. He's in unspeakable torment, and day and night around him are clustered his rescuers, saying, everybody forgives you, you've got to forgive yourself, begging him to forgive himself. He's never ever alone. He's hearing constantly the voices of these people who love him so much. Can you guess who they are?
Victims.
They're his victims. Knowing that, I can forgive anybody anything, I think. Yes, sir.
Roberta, what's your thoughts on what happens to us when we keep evolving higher and higher and higher? What's the end result?
We become more intensely God. Nobody knows why God is doing this. People speculate, I don't know. But we seem to be advancing spiritually, but the good news is that since time doesn't exist, it can take an eternity, and we've already advanced that far. It would take more time to explain what I've learned about this than we have here, and I'm not sure it would help at this stage. But A Course in Miracles, incidentally, I would certainly recommend everybody do, because I did it relatively late since I was avoiding recent channeled material, and it filled in all the gaps in what I still didn't understand. I believe A Course in Miracles is a genuine channeled work of a very advanced being trying to help us better prepare for the next level. Yes?
What's your best advice to help someone like how you described your mother when they're so scared to die? It is their time to die. How do you offer them comfort?
I have read my whole book to my mother. I've read pieces of it to my mother. I've done everything I could to help her understand it's okay. She says, well, I don't want to die. And she says it the way she used to say she didn't want to go to the wrong party. You know, it's just impossible for her to get past it. I don't know how to help those people except to keep telling them it's okay. And this, as soon as they, other than my mother, everybody, when they see those visitors, they're fine. Your mom will be fine. I'm sorry, you were at a hand?
Yeah, when my nephew passed away, my nephew came to visit me in certain instances and flickered lights, and my brother was very upset by it because he felt like, you know, he hasn't moved on with his life, and you shouldn't be calling for him or talking to him because you're keeping him from moving on and being with loved ones, and, you know.
This woman is asking that her nephew who had passed on is flickering the lights and wondering, apparently a family member said that means he hasn't moved on. If you're getting clear signs like that from your loved ones, they have completed their transition and moved on and they're fine. Because in order to do that, they have to be in the Summerland levels and get the help of people who know how to do that. So the answer actually is the opposite. The fact you're getting good signs, flickering lights in this case, indicates he's just fine, and he's just trying to reassure you. One more question, I'm going to tell you my story. Yes?
Do you think there's anything different about dying through suicide than another way?
Suicide is a question I've been trying to avoid because I was sitting with some people who had lost a family member. Suicide is a really mixed bag. Some people who kill themselves either because they're dying already or because they're young, people who are younger than early adulthood, don't seem ever to have a problem with suicide. They feel no guilt, they're fine. Someone in middle life who lost his house and his wife is leaving him and he's kind of bitter and angry and he kills himself, he's going to cause problems for himself. It's very hard to forgive that when you're there. So it's really a mixed bag. I would recommend strongly that if you know somebody who's suicidal, and make sure he understands or she understands that it's not an answer because it doesn't solve anything because you still are alive. You're just alive and unable to do anything about the pain you're causing others. You just can't do it. And there is a real risk that you'll end up on the lower level just because you can't forgive yourself. One follow-up, then I want to tell my story.
When my nephew first passed away from a suicide, the first week that he passed away, I smelled vomit for a week. I was in my car, I was in my bedroom, I was in my bathroom, various places in my home. And my brother experienced the same thing. He lives in San Antonio, Texas. We both experienced the same thing, this like overpowering smell.
What she's saying is that right after this young person who was 17 killed himself, she was smelling vomit, and so were other people in her family. One of the most common things that the dead do to show us they're okay is to produce smells. Commonly cigarette smoke. In my grandmother's case, it was her cologne. They called it toilet water back then. And in this case, it may have been something that he in his mind associated with his own death, and he was helping you understand he was okay. If they can produce a smell, they're fine. Or any kind of sign like that, then they're fine. But he's fine. And once, if we don't acknowledge these signs, they'll stop coming. Every time you get a smell or find a penny or have any sign, and as I say, that's a whole other talk. We could talk forever about what all the ways are that they've learned to show us they're okay. When you just say, thank you, Grandpa, or thank you, to whoever it is, do it again, they'll do it more. If they know you could tell them, they've made a connection to you, and they will keep doing it. Otherwise, it stops pretty quickly after their death. Let me tell you my story. About 5 years ago, I decided I was ready to tell God I would do whatever God wanted me to do, no matter what it was. And not long after that, I found myself writing. Now, I always knew I was going to write this book, but I love my work. I didn't want to stop working. So I was going to someday, when I retired, write this book. But it seemed to be happening, and I was all excited because it was flowing and it was great. And I have a psychic friend I called for some other reason, and she said, paused and said, "Do you know you've got 5 dead clergymen working with you?" I said, "No, I'm not psychic, I have no idea." She told me about them. One of them is so advanced, she said, "I'm amazed. He's been dead so long, he's so advanced, I'm amazed he's still in contact with the earth." And the others were dead Christian clergymen, and one of them is very famous. And when I heard the name, I said, "Oh, why would he work with me?" And she said, "He wants to set the record straight." They all do. So from then on, now that they had made me call this woman for some foolish reason, and they made me know they were there, they started giving me notes. We all traveled to the Summerland and consult with our guides frequently when we're sleeping, and also see our loved ones. And so apparently, I sort of envisioned them collaring me as soon as I arrived, having freshly fallen asleep, and taking me into a room and making me write stuff down. Because I would wake up, and in my mind would be a list of 2 to 5 things that I had to change or research, or you forgot that, or get rid of that. I didn't always agree with them. I didn't always do what they said, so it would be on the next list and the next. And I only got these lists when I was going to be writing that day. I didn't get them every day. But I got used to it, and I started to rely on it, and I did everything they wanted. And only when I went for a couple weeks and there were no more tweaks they wanted, did I know the fun of dying was finished. I was worried because it had flown out of me, just stream of consciousness. That's why there are no footnotes, by the way. They were telling me this stuff. I was worried that I must have made a lot of mistakes, but in the 14 months that it's been out, we have found not one mistake. I didn't get it right. They got it right. That's why there's so much in it about Jesus. That was not my plan. That's all them. They're trying to set the record straight big time. And I was very grateful to them. They started to try to get me to come and speak with you, and I love doing this. This is the most fun you can imagine. They prompted us to start afterlife forums, and we talk about all this, as I say, there. And I was having a heck of a time. But then about a year ago, I realized this was going to be for a long time, and I have a day job. So I said to them in my mind, okay, I'll do this, but I need to be able to support my family. From the whole year that's passed, from that day to this, exactly the right amount of legal work has come in exactly when I needed it. They're taking care of that. But still, I'm kind of a pain, I guess, actually. By last summer, I was starting to flag. I mean, how long am I going to be doing this? My husband has been retired for 15 years, and I was working harder than ever. So, my dear, wonderful guides decided to inspire me. I love mid-century show tunes, Old Man River and Climb Every Mountain and all these inspirational, beautiful, the best music ever written. I love these show tunes. So, bless their hearts, they decided to write me a show tune. I woke up one morning early in August, just this past year, knowing I had just watched 4 beautiful young men in spirit robes, singing and dancing and laughing among the flowers in the intense light of the Summerland. Beautiful. And they were having a heck of a time. They were obviously laughing, having a wonderful time doing this, and feeling kind of silly, I think. And I heard just the refrain of the song they had written for me. And it was, "You've got a wonderful story to tell. Life goes on forever, and there is no hell. So go out there and share that beautiful story."
Can we ask questions? Anybody sign your books?
Wow. Is that wonderful? Thank you so much, Roberta. Wow. That was delightful.